Wait a second. Is that the right opening? I'm not sure. What's going on? Okay, actually, it's the right opening. We're going to do a little bit of a blend here today. Welcome to TV Dinners slash 10 to 1. We are going to do a 10 to 1 list today on TV Dinners and talk about some of our most favorite, most beloved, worth rewatching TV series. We did this on 10 to 1 yesterday where we sort of counted down the year's best so far movies that we have seen. All of the movies I think that are on my list from this year are definitely worth rewatching, in my opinion. And I am going to introduce my guest, Josh. Josh, how are you tonight?
Are
That good, huh?
taken over.
Okay. Oh, it's that kind of pirate show. Okay. Um, you know, so what we were going to do tonight was talk about TV food. And so I'm going to try to sneak in a couple of little mentions for some things that I have either done for my blog or things that I now am inspired to do for the Movies and Meals blog based on my TV series recommendations. I do want to touch on two pieces of news, and I touched on one of them yesterday in our other show, but I'm going to touch on it today in this show because I feel like it's worth sort of mentioning. Oh, we lost Henry Cavill. He fell off the
He's
planet.
dead?
Well, he's dead to me. No, he's not. Uh, Henry Cavill has moved on to greener pastures or red, white, and blue pastures, as the case may be, and is reprising his role for Superman and left The Witcher. Now, that has left The Witcher fandom in an uproar. And I do mean an uproar. There almost immediately were all of these opinions and rumors, and turns out, you know what, sometimes the fans do know what's up. There was talk quite some time ago about Henry Cavill not being happy with the season 2 version of The Witcher and how he was trying to change season 3 so that Geralt could get, more deeper thinking roles, and so that he wasn't the quote unquote grumpy snowman. um Interesting, very interesting, but yeah, no amount of money apparently could woo him back. He was pretty much just done with the part. So now we have Liam Hemsworth. We'll see what happens with Liam Hemsworth. I'm willing to give it a chance. I feel like a lot of Witcherdom is sort of out now and isn't going to check back in, but I'm willing to give it a chance. Who knows where it will go. I stopped watching The Witcher basically after season 1 for its faithful adaptation to the book, because it's not a faithful adaptation to the books. It is a wild fantasy adaptation. So we'll see what happens. Who knows? Something good could happen. And secondly, in TV sort of news, we have a big shakeup happening over at HBO, over at Time Warner, over at Warner Brothers, I should say. I shouldn't call it Time Warner. Lots of things are happening over there. And I say this because, if you are a fan of stuff that comes on TV, which I assume if you're listening to this podcast, you are, HBO Max is kind of a go-to because their catalog is just so weighty. There's some interesting things happening over there which don't bode very well for people that are really interested in the depth of catalog. Um, at one point, we kind of had like the consolidation of everything all at once inside of one big catalog. And now streaming services are beginning to realize, you know what? This isn't a good way to do it because we limit the amount of subscribers that we can actually have for these niche products. So now we're sort of doing an about face and moving back to, yes, these subsidiary companies are all owned by one sort of main corporation, but they're looking at franchising all of their channels again. And we can see this pretty clearly in the AMC announcement this week of having AMC Premiere and AMC, a whole bunch of AMC sort of niche market channels that they're going to debut on Roku. I don't know how this is going to work. Consumers are kind of at the saturation point with the number of subscriptions that they have, the number of subscribe channels that they want to belong to. And so I feel like this is the entertainment industry is missing what the people who are actually consuming their product is really saying. And it's weird that they're so out of touch with it, but it's something to keep an eye on. I know people personally who simply subscribe to whatever the channel is that they're looking for while a show is playing, and then that's it. They disconnect it and they'll wait for whatever else is coming out, and then they will resubscribe. That's not good for subscribe channels. That's a huge problem that they're having. So why we're sort of having these crossed niche messages now doesn't make any sense to me. It's like they're doubling down on what didn't work to say, no, 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 we're going to make this work. We're going to force it to work. And yeah. Okay. So that's my TV news angle for the day. Let's hop into our 10 to 1 list. Um, I'll ask Josh about his list, but
Hmm.
I'll say that I put my list together in the past hour. These are movies. These are TV shows that I enjoy so much that I definitely give them out to all of my friends when my friends say, I really need something to watch. What am I going to watch? Some of them are easily available, some of them are harder to find, but well worth the effort, in my opinion. These are all movies that, like, if I feel sick or if I'm not doing so good and I need, like, a weekend of downtime, these are my go to series that I can watch forever and ever and ever and never get tired of, even when I can recite the episodes by heart. And I know we all have these, so please let us know what they might be for you. I'm really interested in that. So I'm going to ask Josh to start us off with his number 10 pick. And, we don't need to go in any specific order. Let's just say these are our top 10. Because even though I wrote all of these down, honestly, I don't know if I could pick them as 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I would have a hard time with it. So let's just do the top 10. So give me your number 10 on your list and tell me why.
My number 10. Okay. This is this is one that might be a bit of a surprise for a lot of people, but it is a quality program that really found its voice. King of the Hill.
Oh, solid choice. Super solid.
Mike Judge put together quite the amazing, cast and crew, as well as writers. To at the end of the day, really it's really a show about a father and a son,
Right.
and even though they're completely different, and even though they really butt heads a lot, butthead. Sorry. Uh, the thing to remember, the thing that they keep reminding you is that no matter the differences, it's a father and son that actually care about each other, and they love each other.
Right.
I also love the dynamic of Hank being about as straight laced, a person as you can get, but his friends are goofy as hell.
Truth.
And it makes you wonder how this guy has anything in common with the people he spends the most time of his life with.
Uh, You know, uh, King of the Hill is such an awesome slice of life cartoon. That with all the caveats of crazy stuff happens, but it is still
Mhm.
at the end of the day very slice of life. And it definitely makes you feel like there is something exciting happening, despite the fact that it is really just everyday stuff. You go to work, you do have a barbecue, something happens with your friend. I mean, it's just so basic, but they managed to make it super interesting. Also, I got to say I love Peggy. Peggy Hill is one of my favorite characters, truly. I really really love her. She comes in just below um Linda on Bob's Burgers. I have an affinity for them both. They both have different places in my heart. Good choice.
Well, there are some episodes that made me laugh. Well, most of them made me laugh, but there are some that made me cry, and that's when you can do that. I think you're onto something.
Hmm, good choice.
I can't listen to Life in a Northern Town without feels.
And it's that time of year. That song is oddly, for some reason, a Christmas song. So there you go.
One
It's
more thing.
they
One more
really,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
Chuck Mangione.
Oh, yes, yes, indeed. Very good choice. Um, okay, my number 10. Yeah, I mean, there's some. You can't say King of the Hill for me and not. I can't immediately like come back with propane. Strickland propane is like legendary in my mind. Why are you using charcoal? You should be using propane. Yeah, I really I feel Hank in those moments. Um, okay, my number 10 reaches way back into the sort of, well, not way back, but yes, into the way back machine when there were still lots and lots of firsts to be had on TV. Uh, the original Star Trek. I know, everybody has seen some episodes. The number of friends that I have that haven't seen all of them is kind of astounding. If you sit down and watch all of the original Star Treks, you definitely, first of all, you learn some not so nice things about how we kind of used to be, but you also, I think, get a really good idea of why the Star Trek franchise is so interesting and so well developed. The original material that comes from Gene Roddenberry is so well defined and wonderful to explore. I mean, it's just a treat. It's just absolutely a treat. I can watch these episodes again and again and never get bored of them. There are certain episodes that I hold in higher regard than other episodes. I don't When I feel bad, I always want to watch The Trouble with Tribbles. When I feel, like I need a little sort of TLC, I will watch well, like I'll especially the one it's called The Day of the Dove, that's what it's called. Where the Klingons come aboard and there's this entity that makes everybody fight, and in the end they figure out that laughter is the way to get rid of it. Like, there's so many awesome ideas in this, and who doesn't love to hear Scotty say, "I'm giving it all." Like, I'm not even going to try to do the accent. I absolutely love this series. It's a fabulous, fabulous watch. It's only, 2 seasons long, but it's great. Really, really, really love it. So that's my number 10 pick. Star Trek the original.
Well, I'm glad we're not going in any particular order here because that means I can just skip to this next little ditty on the list. It's funny you mentioned the original Star Trek because I have seen every episode,
Yeah, that was very good. Very good.
but I did not have the original Star Trek on my list. I was debating it, I was thinking about it, but
Oh,
in the end, I went with Star Trek: The Next Generation.
hey, also a very solid choice.
And there's more episodes.
Many more episodes.
One of the things that I liked about Star Trek: The Next Generation was in much the same way that the original series tackled, social commentary and just these questions of who we are as people. TNG did sort of an updated version of that with more modern takes on things going on in the world, especially when it comes to mental health. I think it was a little bit ahead of its time when talking of things of that nature. One episode in particular comes to mind is when forgive me, I'm blanking on the name, but when one of the when one of the crew created this fantasy life in the holodeck based on his day-to-day life, and his coworkers found out that they were involved in this guy's fantasies. It became awkward, but it started asking the question, where is the line on these things? Where is the line with intimacy and technology? It was a very thought-provoking episode, and I just use that one as an example. Uh, Whenever the Q shows up, and you have these options to get whatever you want in the universe, all you really have to do is ask for it. You got this being that will solve all your problems, but it's the mentality that no, we're not going to take the shortcuts. We are going to go through the rough patches to earn our spot in the universe. And maybe a more idealistic version of what people could be. That's why I
So,
chose Star Trek TNG.
it's interesting because Star Trek Picard has reintroduced Q into the story, or introduced it into the story. And I mean, Star Trek Picard is kind of like a continuation of TNG, but it is focused on Picard, and there are things that happen in the quote unquote universe that bring everything kind of back around full circle. And it does make me happy that the that 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 the storylines that existed in TNG can continue to exist and really work. That's how you know that it was good storytelling. Because there's no question about whether or not the storylines that were introduced in TNG would still be viable to viewers today. They absolutely are, and we see them continue to happen. So it does kind of make me happy. Um, Also, I mean, I love the entire cast. The entire cast of TNG is just so amazing. They're super awesome. They had some weird moments, but every series does.
Make it so.
Um, okay, very solid choice. Okay, so for my number 9, I am going to also go back. Actually, the next two actually go back in time. I'm going to go back in time again, to a series that also is one of those series that I can pick up and watch just episodically. It's before we actually had long stories that were told season by season, in the same way that Star Trek is kind of like, it's an episodic show. It doesn't really build on episode to episode. Um, and it starred a giant for me in this particular period of history, both as far as being a woman on screen and just being a force of nature. Her name was Barbara Stanwyck, and the series is The Big Valley. Um, I know that this is not everybody's cup of tea. This is definitely a yes. Jen loves westerns. I have one year I went through I spent an entire year trying to watch as many different presentations of westerns as I possibly could, and it was sort of amazing. I mean, westerns have such a wide range, and depending upon who the directors and the producers and the writers are, they have such diverging messages. But I loved The Big Valley for being wholesome, like Little House on the Prairie was wholesome, but not so wholesome that, there weren't, to me, that there weren't like real fundamental dangers happening. The stakes are they always feel so high. And I don't know, maybe it's kind of like watching lifestyles of the rich and famous, uh, old west style, but there's something about the Barkleys that just is so soothing. There's something weird about it. I don't know what it is. And also, I really love the idea that Heath is kind of like, I won't say that he's found family because he actually is the child, but he's not he isn't he's not the total, like, his brothers are half brothers and his sister is his half sister and whatever. But it's still amazing because in a time before found family, this was clearly an indication that that was okay, and at a time when that was not usually okay. I loved all the groundbreaking tropes that this series put forward, and I really love the expansiveness of the cinematography. There is something about watching the Big Valley that makes you feel like you are on or in Stockton, outside of Stockton, before there was anything outside of Stockton. It's just really cool. The other thing that I really love about it is, I mean, there are some problematic pieces in certain episodes, but by and large, this is definitely a series that you could watch with any member of your family. And aside from having a few small things to explain, there really isn't anything like crazy objectionable. It's just solid entertainment. I give this show a lot of credit for, first of all, my growing love for the westerns. But I also, like I said, really have to call out Barbara Stanwyck as being just a pillar of solid acting in this show. She Her acting is so good that it's hard for me to separate Barbara Stanwyck, the person, in other movies, or the actress in other movies, and not see her as Victoria Barkley. I mean, she's just that good. So, number 9 for me, The Big Valley.
Interesting choice. I can't say I've seen every episode, but I've seen a few.
They're very fun. I have them. I actually have this entire thing recorded. I go back to it time and time again. So that's how much I love it. So what's your number 8?
My number 8 is a show all about taking my microphone and smashing it into a million pieces.
Oh, that sounds like a good show. We should watch that together.
Definitely, definitely should, because it's gonna be a banger. Oh, and ooh, for you long-time listeners, or if you're just listening right this particular second and you hear, you know, everything's getting louder. Technical stuff. I just wish I knew how to fix it.
Does Santa need to bring you a new microphone for Christmas, or what's
I don't
going
think
on?
it's the microphone because this is the third microphone that I've changed out, and it's still,
Oh,
but it's the closest thing to take, you know, vengeance on. So that's why I'm blaming the microphone.
not a bad thing.
All right. So what am I? Number 8.
Number 8.
Number 8. It's also time to go back into the Wayback Machine. My number 8, starring Eddie Albert and Ava Gabor, Green Acres. Because Green Acres is the place to be. Okay. If you're ever looking for like just a TV show to make you laugh, Green Acres is one of those that will do it every time. Why? Because I mean it's a simple premise. These city folk move to the country. No, no, they move past the country. They are way beyond the country. They're in the heart of America. They're in farm town. Mm, sorry. And Mr. Douglas, he's a lawyer that just wants to plow the land and watch the little seeds reach out into the sky. you know, well, there's no Fife music playing for me, but if there was, I would be able to go on for a while. I believe that's where he gets his superpowers from. The power to inspire those around him, or actually the power to make his friends and neighbors look at him sideways. It's a colorful cast of really odd characters from Hooterville, and I don't know
Hooterville.
if it was the the town that influenced his wife, or if she was just kind of kooky all along. But as the as the show goes on, Lisa kind of goes native, and she's uh, becomes just as zany as everybody else. And it seems like Mr. Douglas is the only sane one around. Anytime somebody shows up on screen, they're there for a laugh, and it's usually at Mr. Douglas's expense. From the Munro brothers to Mr. Haney to Fred Ziffel to Arnold Ziffel, Mr. Drucker, everybody's there to kind of feed into the comedy. And it's one of the reasons why, no matter when you watch this show, it's still relatable because of the classes of people involved. That hasn't changed. Sure, some of the style has, but quite frankly, um, everybody's positions in life is just as relatable today as it was in the '60s.
It's so
So that,
funny. Ava Gabor is like the original Kardashian.
except with an acting job.
Yes, except with an acting job. And also, there's a lot of shows around that time which have that vibe. Um, I'm glad that you chose that one because I think that that is actually one of the better. But there's a bunch that I feel similarly um, kind of enamored with, like Gilligan's Island and I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched. They all have that kind of like odd they're offbeat, but they're fun. They're fun in a way that shows today sometimes. Yeah, I mean, we're more sophisticated as audiences, so it's not to say that I'm like nostalgic for those times, but it's nice to have those in sort of our TV show catalogs to go back to and revisit, because it really does harken to a very simpler time. um
Hmm.
and it's nice. It's very nice. I feel very comforted by that.
I think the difference between these and some of the other shows at the time is, a lot of those other shows leave a pretty big timestamp on themselves, whether it's through um, the scenery, or the job some of the people have. It's very '60s when you watch them. Green Acres, it could really take place at any time.
That's a good point. That is a good point.
Glamour is going to be glamour. Suits are going to be suits. Overalls are going to be overalls. That's Green Acres. That's why it's that was my next pick. Yay me! I did it.
I didn't realize I was on mute. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think that that is an excellent choice. Good, solid choice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, last one. This one is uh, probably nobody has even heard of this, but I'm gonna mention it because I think everybody should hear about this one. it it really is very Gen style. It uh, it aired on PBS in the early 90s, late 80s, I want to say. Um in fact, I'm now I have to go look it up because I need to make sure that I get this right. Okay, so it oh, I'm so sorry. Wow. I was wrong. I saw it later. I saw it as a rerun, apparently. The original release date was uh, April 28th, 1984. And its final show was 1986. So it had a short run.
Can I guess? Can I guess?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Story Lords.
No, but that
Oh.
was a good guess because that also is great. This series is specifically centered around Robin Hood. It's called Robin of Sherwood. It had 3 seasons. One season starred one Robin Hood, and then they went through this sort of odd change where they tried to explain it, and they kind of did a good job. And the central protagonist, Robin Hood, was none other than Sean Connery's kid. Um, his name was Jason. And he was really good. He was excellent in this role. It takes the Robin of Sherwood, Robin Hood story to a new level with a lot of different lore. There is this kind of forest spirit that ties some things together and makes it makes the time period and the story have extra elements to it, which is really great. But the thing that I loved about this so much is, okay, first of all, don't walk into this expecting some kind of super high production values because it's not. I mean, it's like a bunch of guys with some really good costumes larping in the forest. Um but there's a bunch of people in it that you probably have seen in other shows now. And so that kind of, when you see them, you're like, oh my God, hey, I know those people. That's kind of cool. Um, the one, I shouldn't say the one. The one of the most interesting things about this is that they really did use incredibly um, authentic places, shooting places, settings that don't just lend it themselves to the atmosphere. They make the atmosphere. It's kind of amazing. I mean, there are so many places in London now that almost, they don't look the same anymore. Back then, they were a little bit more open, and I can't believe that they let these film crews come in and do this stuff. There's just some great places that they filmed in. Abbeys, monasteries, great halls of old castles, really super cool stuff. um, and then on top of that, the story itself to me feels so much more authentic to the what I would assume would be the Robin Hood, Sheriff of Nottingham, if that existed, kind of premise. Because it wasn't, the sheriff wasn't so over the top that he was like a caricature of evil. It's more like, yeah, he was the sheriff, and he did not have an easy job. Loved Prince John in this. Just everything was just so well put together, and it's one of those comfort shows that I absolutely love. It isn't, again, I just have to restate this. It is not the kind of show that you should walk into going, "Oh, this is going to be like the Robin Hood that, came out of the BBC with Toby Stephens as Prince John." No, it's not like that. It is definitely its own sort of homebrew, but really excellently done. Again, it was created, or it wasn't created, but it was aired on PBS. It was so good for just its genuine take on the Robin Hood story. And I can watch this over and over again and never get bored. I always see something new when I watch these episodes. So, this is my big, hey, if you haven't seen this, you should definitely take a look. You probably haven't seen it before. Also, the music is really good. So there you go. There is my number. Where are we at? Number 7. That's my number 7.
Alrighty, then I guess we'll move on to my number 6. Let's see. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and buzz this one out now.
Go ahead.
Quantum Leap.
Oh, hey, that's a solid choice too.
Does it have a few moments where you're like, okay, that didn't age well? Sure. But for the most part, it was definitely a show ahead of its time for the way it dealt with handling certain characters, situations with a, straight white dude being, thrown right into the middle of these things and seeing from his eyes, through their eyes, exactly what life was like. Whether he was, leaping into a person of color or someone with a physical or mental disability, it was just intriguing to see him learn about how other people are treated. And that's not even getting to the nitty gritty of it's an adventure show. So every time he leaps into somebody, there's something horrible wrong that he has to make right. Whether it involves, oh, maybe this person should have asked this person out, all the way to, well, this, entire family was kidnapped. We got to figure out what happened. Now, using one episode as an example, well, I'm really cheating. It's a two-episode arc. When he leapt into Lee Harvey Oswald,
Oh gosh.
and it was, by all accounts, not your normal episode because he didn't just leap into Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald was trying to take control of the body back. So Sam would get pushed out and then have to come back at a different point in his life. So he's kind of jumping in and out of Lee Harvey throughout these points, all the way up to that day in Dallas.
Right.
And they take you all the way up to that moment. I'm not going to say what happens, even though I know it's a show that's ran its course a while back. But this particular story arc is still worth going in as fresh as possible. So just the fact that they went there, the fact they did what they did with the story, as well as the outcome, it's one of those moments that kind of stayed with me ever since it originally aired. And I of course gone back and watched it a few times since, and every time I'm still like, that's amazing. That is amazing television. So that, and of course, the amazing friendship that plays out on screen between Sam and Al. Scott Bakula became a hero of mine that day. Not that day, but for this series. And Dean Stockwell, rest in peace. He was an amazing sidekick. Loved it. Loved every
Very
second.
good choice.
It's my number seven.
Very good choice. Well, I'm going to skip forward into history here a little bit, a la Quantum Leap. No, not really. Because, yeah, that's not exactly how that worked. Um, that should always sort of messed me up a little bit. Because even at the time when I was watching it, I was a lot more invested in history than maybe most people. And I had a hard time enjoying the show for the show because I felt like the historical inaccuracies and anachronisms were so glaring that it at a time when I wasn't thinking about who are the writers for this show, I subconsciously was thinking, who are the writers for this show? Who wrote this? Because did they not know history? What was going on? Was it's yeah. It's one of those interesting, can you be entertained by it, or are you so annoyed by the little things that you can't? For me, I was so annoyed by the little things that I just couldn't get into the show. Sorry, but it is a good show. Um okay, my next pick, and these are in no particular order, right? So just bear with me here. Uh, my next show is it was a limited run, but it still had what, 3 seasons? And I I know people who have seen this, and either they loved it or they hated it. And I don't know how to I don't know how to figure out why they either loved it or they hated it. That doesn't even cut into the people who sort of read source material for it. I mean, that's a totally different thing because there are pieces of this that definitely come right out of the source material. So it's kind of that's kind of an interesting aspect to it. But anyway, it aired in 2016. There were 43 episodes, and it's called Preacher. It starred Dominic Cooper, uh, Ruth. What is her last name? Nega, I think, and a bunch of other people who were absolutely fabulous in in this series. Um, it jumps all over the place. It deals with basically, here's what happens. The voice of God, which we find out later is kind of a wandering interplanetary entity, enters our preacher, who is basically given up on faith. And when he uses the quote unquote word of God, he can compel anybody to do anything that he wants to. And it's you know obviously there are ways to use this which seriously can make you not very a good person, and then there are ways to use it that could make you a little bit better of a person. So there's all of these elements of good and evil in it. There's all of these ideas that sort of run the gamut with, are we dealing with Judeo-Christianity or are we dealing with something else? And it really veers in multiple directions. We have scenes in in this series where there is an actual hell, and there's a breakout from actual hell. And all of these things that sort of happen along the way make you question what is really going on here. Um, it's knockdown, drag out, fabulous. There is so little in Preacher that I would want to sort of like give away, because if you haven't seen it, it's a treat. It is an absolute treat. But if you have seen it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The relationships between all of the characters evolve and devolve over time. They, go from loving each other to hating each other to loving each other to, trying to kill each other on multiple occasions. There are so many different ideas in here, different faiths, different ideas of what the supernatural is, different ideas of what quasi science sort of is, how you reconcile all these things together. It's just flat out unbelievably awesome. It's to me, it is kind of like somebody just gave Seth Rogen, Sam Cartland, and Evan Goldberg carte blanche and said, "Here, just go do whatever you want to do. Make us some prestige TV, and we'll reward you for it." And that's exactly what Preacher did. I can watch this show over and over and over again. I never get tired of it. There's only 43 episodes, but that is plenty to get into the world, feel like you are immersed in it, and lots of cool things happen. So that's my number 6, Preacher. It was originally aired on AMC. I know you can still find it on AMC, on their on demand channel. And I think there's another place you can find it too, on Roku. But anyway, yes, that's my choice. So, have you ever seen that?
I have not.
It is really, really, really good. It is based off of a um it's based off of a graphic novel kind of situation. Just as a quick sort of trivia fact, um, the AMC had dropped it, and HBO, under new management, basically, um, said, "No, we can't do this because it's too dark and too violent, and we think it's going to be too controversial." So, if that gives you an idea, HBO said that. If it gives you some kind of idea about how upside down this thing is, that would be a pretty good indication. It was too dark, too violent, and too controversial for HBO. So
Ugh.
there you go.
And they're the ones that aired the you know the Game of Thrones thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really says a lot that HBO wasn't willing to pick it up. But you know what? No mind. Yes, there are some unanswered questions, but does that preclude you from having a great time with the series? Absolutely not. It is really good.
Well, then I guess I will move on to my next pick. Let's see. Listen, I just have a list put together here. You know what? I'm going to go with, I think, one of the most clever sitcoms of the last. I have to think about the dates because every time I do the math, it's like, there's no way in hell that's correct.
How could that be 30 years old?
Exactly. How can this be 30 years old? But apparently it is roughly that. Um, Next on my list is dinosaurs.
No, not the mama.
Not the mama.
My kids loved that show.
It is a great show, all the way up to the really, really freaking downer of an ending. It is absolutely hilarious. Sort of a mixture of the honeymooners and, you know, dinosaurs. What is the show? It's a show about a family of dinosaurs that live in the wonderful modern prehistory uh, world of dinosaurs. Of course, they have all of the amenities that we do today. From well, not today, but at the time, they have TV, they have soul crushing jobs, and they have every once in a while exchanges, verbal exchanges, conversations with their food, and it is a really clever satire wrapped in um, a Muppet show. Essentially, you sort of get lost um, in the characters and come to think of them not as people manipulating plastic and whatever rubber, I guess, big rubber suits,
Yeah.
because the way that the way that these things emote on the show is absolutely amazing, especially for the time. Nowadays, it would just be like a crazy CGI fest that would steadily decline in quality over the years as you know the studios fail to justify in keeping a special effects budget that high. But keeping it practical means you can keep a pretty steady um, a pretty steady quality level as far as the visuals go. But seeing the misadventures of Earl and Fran and and the kids, it's just like watching human TV shows. It's a guy, his mother-in-law has to come live with him, and he's not thrilled about that. His kids have a hard time respecting him because he's just a tree pusher. But kind of like King of the Hill, at the end of the day, it's about a family, regardless of species, that that loves each other and would do anything for each other. Now, some
And
of the story arcs that they went through, some of them had some pretty dark themes. They tackled things like drugs and war, not something you'd expect from this silly puppet show about dinosaurs, but they did it and they did it incredibly well. In fact, the writing for this show was so well done that in my first year of college, our English professor um, would play a few episodes and kind of use it to demonstrate the use of satire. And no, I wasn't in college when it aired, so it's not like they're like this new thing. No, it stood out, and this particular professor thought that the way this show utilized its writers and uh, the the tools at its disposal stood the test of time, and it was worth teaching and reteaching. That is
it
why dinosaurs made my list.
dinosaurs, so I'm, boy, this is a tough one. So I'm really glad that you liked this series. And I know a lot of people, especially people that were seriously watching TV in the 90s, really did love it. Um, I I have a different take on dinosaurs. I, it's not that I didn't like it because it's fine for passive entertainment. Um, I never actually felt like it was satire, uh, in the way that I think some people ascribed some of the writing to be. And I think part of the reason is because it's really hard to take a lot of it seriously. And I don't mean, obviously you're not taking satire seriously, but you have to have an element of sort of like, okay, well, where's the kernel that we're supposed to grab the satire from? And I always found that dinosaurs treated everything incredibly irreverently. And it reminds me a lot of this, for the same reason that I don't like, as an example, South Park, which I know is beloved by many, and I don't diss anyone for loving South Park. I just can't quite, I don't fit it. I don't quite like, it's a good solid show. And like I said, my kids loved this show. It was on in my house whenever it was available, somebody was watching it. But I don't know if I would actually go back and watch it again, because it just, there's something about it that doesn't sit right with me. I don't know what it is. Not exactly. I mean, part of it is that piece, but part of it is also, I think, in some ways, dinosaurs reminds me of a Muppet version of the Flintstones, and sometimes that ga- I guess garish kind of style of like being in your face and everybody's yelling and there's, constant stuff that's always happening. It feels like it's overwhelming. Over, and not in a good way. Like there's no pause ever in dinosaurs. It's just you sit down and you're in for however long the episode lasts. It's a constant sensory fest of stuff. Um, and I don't know, maybe I just had a hard time with that with my own sensory issues. I'm not sure, but there we go. But it is definitely, I know that people really do love to watch that show again and again. So I think it actually, I mean, I can see why it's on your list. I really can. Um, okay, I'm gonna pick another one that I don't think a lot of people saw. I wish that they had, because I personally feel like it was genius. Um, However, I will say that and then also caveat it by saying there are people that I know that saw this that said this is trash. I don't understand what you see in it. So, I mean, yeah, this is just my own personal pick. Back in 2017, I think it was, um, I got super excited because FX, which was still huge at the time, was going to feature something that was based off the Marvel comics. And I this is one of the stories from Marvel that I always found absolutely insane. Like, how would you ever do this in a movie? Or I wasn't even thinking on TV, but it just it enthralled me. It's the story of David Haller, and the show is called Legion. It ran for 3 seasons. It delved into the schizophrenic brain of a mutant. Now, David's powers are so David is so powerful that I dare say, I don't know, Josh, jump in and tell me if I'm wrong here, but David's powers are so powerful that I would almost say that he's one of, if not the most powerful mutants that are out there. Would you agree with that?
Undoubtedly, yes.
Um, and it's his descent both into sort of madness and trying to understand what makes him tick, along with just sort of the general craziness of everything, that makes this series so good. There are time eaters. There are um, th- there's this whole sort of like kind of subplot. I mean, it's not really a subplot; it's part of the main, but it kind of veers off into this thing called Division Three, which is like the the government sort of trying to get a handle on mutant powers. There's just so many awesome facets to this. Now, the reason that I chose it is because, first of all, the standout performances from Dan Stevens as David Haller are absolutely amazing. Oh, also, I forgot to mention that David Haller is the mutant son of Charles Xavier. So, like, that should give you a little bit of sort of breadth of information about who David Haller is. Now, and he ends up being very messed up, but inside of his brain, we experience so many things that are incredibly profound and powerful. Um, and all of the cast in this series, they're just all out. I mean, everything is just absolutely over the top. There's a lot of stuff in here that is, I would fathom to say, not safe for, under 14. It's definitely not a series that I would have had my kids watch. Um, but as an adult, it's so amazing. There's so many facets to this. And each time you rewatch this series, you'll notice that there are amazing uses of both lighting. The set itself kind of becomes its own character in certain places. Um, there's all of these odd jumps that you have to figure out. It's a feast for both intellectual and entertainment brain, and for that, I will watch it again and again and again because it's just absolutely that good. Um, Again, I don't know how many people actually saw it, but this is I really try to actively push Legion on people that haven't seen it as, listen, if you love Marvel and you are looking for something a little bit different and outside of the standard who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, this is the series for you. It is muddy as heck, but it's super cool. So Legion gets my top or gets my spot for what are we at? Are we at number 5? At number 5. Have you seen Legion, Josh?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, no, I
No, you didn't see it?
haven't. No.
Oh, wow. um this is definitely, I mean, like, I say this about a lot of stuff for you, but this is definitely one of those series that you should run, not walk, to go find. I feel like you would especially really like how twisty and turny it is. Um, it's just fabulous, fabulous, fabulous.
Okay, okay, I can dig that. But as you know, I'm on my Golden Girls kick.
Yes, I know, I know. Eventually, there will come a day when you'll be looking for something new to watch, and hopefully, you'll this will come up.
Perhaps.
So, are we at number 4? We're at number 4, right?
Are we at number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? So number. I wish I.
I,
I have
I think we're
one,
at number
two,
4.
three, four. I have 5. Number 5. We're at number 5.
Mm, okay, sorry.
Because I'm checking them off as we go through it.
Oh, so
And
Legion was my number 6, not my number 5. Sorry, everybody.
now we have to do it all over again.
Oh, God. Okay, I'm going to go change my list.
And I'm going to turn that down. Okay, my number 5. My number 5 is. Let's see. My number 5 is Canadian. That should be an interesting lead in. There have been many sketch comedy shows over the years, but as far as their impact on me and an everlasting impact, I didn't want to be redundant there, but here we are. Kids in the Hall
Oh, hey.
just lit up my life when I watched it, and
That has so many seasons, too.
mm-hmm. And they just had a new season.
You know what? I actually got to see some of that. And I was absolutely loved it. I was really happy with it. Really happy with it.
When I watched News Radio and Kevin McDonald showed up for an episode, I was like, it's a reunion.
Nice.
Because Dave Foley's on News Radio. You see. Anyway, there's something magical every time that Dave, Mark, Kevin, Bruce, and Scott wind up in front of a camera together. It's most likely going to be funny. There's a slight chance it's going to be sort of offensive to certain sensibilities. But there is usually 100% chance it's going to be weird or slightly askew. The Kids in the Hall created sketch after sketch built around, I'd like to say they built them around characters. It wasn't just, premise, punchline, get out of there. They created characters that actually were useful for more than just the one sketch. That's something SNL rarely seems to do in its, 100-year history. Every once in a while, you get a shining moment on the big time sketch comedy show, but Kids in the Hall did it on the regular. All of them amazing comic actors in their own right, but as a force, as a team, they were undeniable and unstoppable. That is why Years and years later, when Amazon called upon them, they, to great approval, brought back the series for at least one season. But in the meantime, there had always been after the main series. You know, you got Brain Candy, their feature film, as well as Death Comes to Town, which was a miniseries where they played several people in a town um, where shenanigans are afoot. And that's one of the most, I think, one of the funniest things about Kids in the Hall wasn't just these guys were willing to do anything for a laugh, but there wasn't a character it seemed they wouldn't play to make the sketch work. Kids in the Hall is definitely a top fiver for me, even if we were going in order, and that's why it made my list.
Yeah, good choice. That is definitely great entertainment. um, okay, my next choice is wow, I'm really kind of working in an odd pattern here. My next choice is a series that came out back just a couple years ago, actually. And I wasn't sure if I was gonna like this. I kind of, I kind of thought, how good can a comedy series be, especially a comedy horror series? It, and when I say it came out a couple years ago, I actually mean it came out uh, almost 10 years ago. Well, not quite, but we're moving in that direction. It was one of the last things that Bruce Campbell did. It was called Ash versus the Evil Dead. Premiered in 2015, I think. um, it ran for 3 full seasons, and it was unbelievably awesome, over the top in almost every single way. The thing that really seals this for me, though, and makes me like to watch it again and again, is it's so faithful to the spirit of what Ash versus the Evil Dead is. Like, the Deadites, the cropping up of things in unexpected ways, the intuitive nature of MacGyvering the world around him in order to defeat any kind of Deadite presence, and kind of how his backstory worked, what happened, who the people are around him, and then some new people too. And it all, I mean, it's so brilliantly put together. And on top of that, it's just so much fun. For a comedy horror, it's super rare. I mean, like I'm gonna say that I thought Chucky was gonna go down this road. I don't know after this season. I'm on the fence about it. But it has that same feeling to it. It's really cool to watch. It's fun to see again and again because once again, like a lot of the other series that I chose, there's something new to see. And there's lots of like little hidden gems in this series, which are kind of cool. Lots of shout outs to the original Evil Dead movies and some fun ideas about who the Deadites are and what Ash's past was that kind of brought him to where he was or is eventually. Um, I love that Lee Majors was his dad. That was super cool. And just sort of everything about this world is just really interesting. I really liked this series. We didn't miss a single episode. We saw every single one on time. We moved plans in order to make sure that we could see these episodes when they aired. That's how really good it was. So I'm going to say that Bruce Campbell and Ash versus Evil Dead definitely needs to take a top spot on my list. So there you go, Ash versus Evil Dead, 2015, and I think that this one aired. Where did Ash versus Evil Dead air? Um, I can't remember.
You said
It was
when?
on one of the no, where? It was on one of the pay
Stars.
channels. Stars, there we go. Oh yeah, so that's a big mess right now because Stars is going through another reshake. So I'm not sure where exactly the catalog might be, but I do know that you can, if you search it on Roku, you can find it. So take a look for it because this is a fun one.
Ash vs. the Evil Dead was a good show. That's where we learned that the original plans in what was the Evil Dead 2 was to hit up the cabin for a night and then in the morning head down to Jacksonville, Florida.
Right. And we also learned that Ash has an awesome nickname, Ashy Slashy. So yeah, yeah, it's just so fun. I love this series so much.
Well, next on my list is, I think, one of the greatest animated series of all time. Developed and created by Matt Groening.
Hmm.
It is, of course, Futurama.
Good choice. Love Futurama.
Futurama was one of the first shows where myself and the kids really got into it together. Well, I mean, I was already into it, but I was able to get them into it. They were pretty young watching it, but Futurama is one of those shows that, with a lot of these others, like I've mentioned, it has a tendency to always make you laugh and sometimes hit you right in the feels in the most unexpected ways. It is filled with hilarity, great characters, classic moments, but it also has a way of displaying a, a sort of beauty uh, in the world of sci-fi that it's not necessarily because of the setting, not nearly as much as um, the way you feel about the characters after watching them grow. And that's, I think, a really interesting path to take when it comes to an animated series because it's really easy to do a straight episodic animated series where at the end of each episode things are basically reset to what they were before the episode started. It's easy to do that. That way you can, air them in any order you want and you don't miss anything. But the character progression throughout the series is admittedly subtle, but it's there. And as you grow more and more attached to these characters as they grow and change, whether it's Fry or even Bender and his struggle with his relationship with humanity itself, i.e., destroy all humans. Whether it's Leela's wanting to know about her own lineage, her own history, they find ways to tell excellent stories in this really silly version of the future.
Yeah, it's pretty goofy. Futurama has that kind of like it's goofy in a way that um that makes it fun to watch even when you're watching something kind of serious, which is interesting because not all adult cartoons actually make that. Uh Sometimes they either it becomes forced, which is it just then it's kind of ridiculous, or
Hmm.
it feels really out of place, like it feels out of character for the characters to experience those things. And that's a huge problem. Futurama, it never feels that way because it's just it's almost sublimely silly. And so we can expect anything, and that really kind of works. They're not bound by any of the laws of the known or unknown universe. It's just kind of a free for all, which is kind of cool.
And I think a good way to summarize that with an example from the show is when Professor Farnsworth is explaining how the Planet Express uh, engine works, and how one of the characters is like, "No, that's impossible. Um, Ship can't go faster than the speed of light." And he's like, "That's true, but the ship doesn't go faster than the speed of light. It makes the universe move."
Yeah,
And the
right.
ship just kind of sits there. He's like, "That's double impossible." And he's like, "Shut up." It's like it's that kind of like you said, it's silly, but it's done so well. You could be literally any age and find something completely enjoyable. And the last thing I'm going to say about Futurama is, I told you it's fun, it's silly, it's um, at times heartbreaking and heartwarming, but nobody ever gives credit to the animators. And when it comes to Futurama, there are a lot of times where there is just so much going on in the background, whether it's referencing things like Doctor Who or Star Trek or just any other great sci-fi properties from the past, or just the random citizens of New York. The animators don't get enough credit for adding so much life to this world, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm pointing it out and I'm saying those guys did a great job.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. That it was definitely a really good show. Okay, so as far as shows go that I will watch again and again and again, probably it comes as no surprise to anybody who knows me that I kind of have a thing for historical dramas. And this one definitely set me on a totally different road. I had no idea that I would love how violent and crazy it was, but I really loved it. It premiered on Stars, I believe, in 2011. No, was it 2011 or 2010? I don't know. I think, oh, it was 2010. I just looked it up. Uh, it it was on Stars. It was called Spartacus. It was created by Sam Raimi and Stephen DeKnight, not to be confused with Stephen Knight. Stephen DeKnight also went on to do Pacific Rim and a couple of other things. Really cool guy. Follow him on Twitter. He's really cool. Spartacus is one of the few series that is like, okay, this is one of those series that I feel like, again, they basically just threw a bunch of money at these people and said, okay, do what you want. And they fixated on hyperviolence, hypersex, uh, what is it that makes the gladiators the rock stars of their time, but what also can we do to make this as gritty and terrible as possible? And they succeeded on all levels. It is absolutely sex every third scene, violence every other scene, plotting, scheming, interesting, vengeful plots, lots of really cool little vignettes of history. This is the first series that I've seen that did gladiators kind of more true to the history of gladiators than I've seen ever, really, kind of put together. It was gritty, it was terrible. It was, the few successes that they had were very overshadowed by the horrific and hundreds of thousands of not successes. Spartacus does something that I think few series really do from a historical standpoint, in that it gives us something that is highly entertaining and, again, just over the top, while maintaining this kind of like shout outs to the real history of what Rome would have been like at the time. It was, not a glamorous place. And I kind of loved that. I loved how the spectacle of being a citizen was something that was, I don't know, it was like it. Yes, there were some perks that went along with it, but it was terrible. It was still terrible, and they really never shy away from that. It originally starred Andy Whitfield, who unfortunately passed away before they were able to even get to the second series. So what they did was they created the first season, and it had Andy Whitfield in it, and then they did like a prequel season where they went back and kind of talked about how the ludus, which is where all of the gladiators trained, how that started. And I have to say, big giant shout out to John Hanna. Um, I I never would have taken him as the person to be Batiardus in this series, but he does such a good job. His acting just made that character that character. It was so excellent. Lucy Lawless is his wife. She also did an amazing job. After that season aired, the next season starred Liam McIntyre. It never sort of like really recaptured the glory of the first and the second season, but it did go on to have two more seasons, which are infinitely worth watching, especially if you like that kind of show where there's like a lot of strategizing, a lot of visceral battles, a lot of high energy shots. um Really inventive camera work, really inventive, and pretty good stories that really give us full depth of characters. It's super interesting. I can watch this many times, and I always am asking people if they saw this show. A lot of people who were in my fan group for another show that I watched, it's actually on my list, had never heard of Spartacus, and they were super interested in it, and we kind of built together a little group around that too. So if you like historical dramas, this is definitely an over the top version of who Spartacus was, but really well done. So that's my number 5 pick is Spartacus. There you go.
Well, according to my math, if every other scene is
Hyperviolence.
hyperviolence and every third scene is super sexy, then every sixth scene is super sexy hyperviolence.
That's not actually far off. So I'm gonna say, yeah, yeah. It's everywhere, everything, all the time. It and you have to kind of see it to understand what I'm talking about. There, I feel like this series captured a moment in time that, honestly, if they tried to produce this today, network people would be like, "Are you crazy? You can't make this. This is no, no, we're not doing this." Um, it gives me. I almost put this on my list because I do watch this one also again and again. It gives me Rome vibes. The Rome series on HBO, it gives me that kind of feel. Like it's just all out kind of crazy in its depiction of how terrible that those moments in history were. The thing is with Rome, even though there's a lot of sex and a lot of violence in it, there's a lot more to the series Rome that is uh deeper political stuff. And in Spartacus, the political stuff is more quote unquote in-house. Like it surrounds the gladiators, it surrounds the ludus, it's very centralized until we get into War of the Damned, where basically it's Rome against Spartacus because they're a bunch of freed slaves on the loose. So, or I shouldn't say free, rebellion. It's an interesting kind of twist to that kind of storytelling. So you're not wrong. You're really not wrong.
Math doesn't lie.
It's true. That's super true.
Well, my number three is one of my favorite shows ever, and I've watched it so many times. I think everybody should get through it at least once. No, I
Mm,
guess that should be every show on these lists. It's kind of the purpose. But
it better be.
um, created by Dan Harmon, it's a show that I've mentioned a lot on every show that I've ever done. It's Community. It is an ensemble piece that is done so well, so cleverly that every episode is not only a self-contained laugh riot, but the continuity manages to stick the landing almost every time, and the callbacks to previous episodes in so many super subtle ways is one reason to keep watching over and over again, so you can pick up on these little clues as to what's been going on and what's happening. One of my favorite things about it is the writing, uh, using a very particular style that Dan Harmon, I don't want to say is popularized, but he definitely has made the most of it, taking the characters, putting them in an awkward situation. You know what? You know what? One of the best things about the show is using an example. They could do a zombie episode, right? You would think, oh, that's just a complete break from the reality of the world. No, the way they did it, it not only feels right, and to be fair, no, it wasn't like super duper actual zombies, but the way they did the episode and the effects that it has and on the continued continuity, hilarious. The themed episodes that you get every season, well, almost every season, are some of my favorites. The Christmas specials, really leaning heavily into Christmas tropes, which, if you want to hear more about tropes, you can listen to last week's episode of TV Dinners when this one is over.
That
Little
was
plug
a
here.
fun one.
And like I said, I love the paintball episodes because not only do you get the the characters at war on this, community college campus, but every year the paintball wars have a different theme. So one year it's a western, and one year it's basically Die Hard. Another year it's like a sci-fi flick. It's crazy. The insanity that this show brings to the table with its well, I'll just say the gymnastics of of the character arcs is awe-inspiring, especially if you're someone that has a keen eye for detail and can see um, the multiple layers of things just going on at one time. And I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about it wasn't necessarily an entire clip show, but there was a bit of a time when they were talking about the things that have happened, but it was stuff that never happened on the actual show. They're telling stories about their previous zany adventures that I guess never. I mean, to them it happened, but to us, we never got those episodes. Is what it boils down to, and they were breaking down their own tropes, um, breaking down their own formula, and it ends with this classic winger speech to inspire the group, and yet it's just different cuts from all of the weird things that they were doing during the time stories they were talking about. And that's one of I could never really tell if Abed was breaking the fourth wall, but he was certainly calling out um, the show itself, and that's how we got that popular hashtag 6 seasons in a movie. With the movie now on the way, finally the prophecies being fulfilled. Community, to me, one of the greatest American ensemble pieces, and should definitely be watched at least once if you're into uh, good to great writing and comedy. That's why it's my
Cool.
number three.
I knew that would be on your list, to be honest. I absolutely knew. Just like I know that you knew that this movie, or I mean, that this series would be on my list. I cannot get through a list of my favorite TV shows without mentioning both my awesome fan group. I love you guys, with like 10,000 people in it now. Um, I started out watching this series because Spartacus ended. And I was like, what's next? It's got to be something good. And about a month later, or 2 months later, or whatever, Black Sails appeared. And Black Sails is the Pirates of the Caribbean for grown-ups. No, actually, it's not Pirates of the Caribbean for grown-ups because that is totally misleading. Black Sails is its own unique story. It is the prequel to Treasure Island, but it is the prequel to Treasure Island as if Robert Louis Stevenson had really written this for a above 17 audience. I mean, like, it is definitely as rated R can get. It is visceral, it is violent, it is incredibly dark. But it's also filled with the kind of what I think is a pretty true-ish depiction of how piracy was born, and how people followed charismatic captains around in order to eke out these, small fortunes. Um, it really is a moment in storytelling history. I can still the opening features a hurdy gurdy. It was scored by one of the people that I brought up in one of my other 10 to 1 podcasts for being an amazing composer, Bear McCreary. And there's something about the marriage of all the excellence in technical details for this particular series. It was honored with Creative Arts Emmy. It was honored for visual effects, outstanding visual effects. It was honored almost every single year that it came out. It was given either a Creative Arts Emmy or a visual effects or both. Um, it was truly an excellent series that just sort of captured everything that was nuanced about pirate stories that we are used to seeing mocked and made fun of. It brought it back to, wait a minute, these are actual human stories with human people in them. And it was messy and it was incredible. I don't just love Black Sails. I have seen Black Sails probably 6 or 7 times in its entirety. I am always excited to welcome new people into the Black Sails family. Once you see the first season of Black Sails, it's so easy to get sucked in to everything that's about to happen. Toby Stevens gives an unbelievable performance as Flint. It's I can't even begin to express the gravitas that this guy has on screen as Flint. It's just incredible. Because then if you hop over to Lost in Space on Netflix and you watch him as, kind of the all-American dad, you would never be able to see Flint in that. It's scary how good he is. Um and of course, there's a lot of other characters in Black Sails which make the series so awesome. Zach McGowan plays an unbelievable pirate Vane. Um, Mark Ryan, who ironically was actually also in Robin of Sherwood. His acting career is like 50 years long, 5 decades. Mark Ryan has been doing TV. It's crazy. He plays Flint's kind of almost partner in crime and then his nemesis. In just absolutely unbelievable job by the entire cast. And there's something for everyone. There is bisexual relationships, there is same-sex relationships, there is straight relationships, there is so much that is sort of just embodies the human condition through everything. There's anger, there's hope, there's love, there's uncharacteristic goodness and uncharacteristic nastiness. There's a pirate named Ned Lowe who is the just an abomination who brilliantly was played, absolutely brilliant, by Mr. Murphy. I loved him. Um, there's just there's an ocean of goodness inside of Black Sails. Ray Stevenson plays Edward Teach, Blackbeard, who also ends up being just a hurricane force on screen. There are so many good aspects to Black Sails that it's hard for me to even put into words what they all are. I will just say that my passion for Black Sails has propelled me in directions I never thought I would go. I am so happy that this is a body of work to look back on and be able to really savor and appreciate it. Again, I always see and hear different things when I watch this series from beginning to end. Um, it's moving. It is just a force of nature. So as a series, this brings my number two position, I think, solidly. That feels like a solid number two position. I really, really, really love this series. So there you go, Black Sails.
This is what happens when we don't properly number our list because we are all over the place.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was I at number three and not number two?
I think so because I
Oh,
still have
I'm sorry.
two left on my list.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I was ahead on the last
Like
one too. You're right because I skipped the one that actually fits my number two spot. So okay. Okay, so it's my number three.
but don't worry. If you listen to an actual episode of the 1021 podcast, we are so on top of it.
Yeah, we really are way more organized, but let's be honest, we put this list together in less than an hour, so we didn't have a week's worth of preparation to make this work. Or at least I didn't. So the sloppiness of my record keeping is very apparent in the amount of time that it took me pre-show to put this together. So I apologies all around.
And I've just been sitting on this list forever. So.
Okay, so what's your number three?
uh, well, my number two now.
Now you're right. Now you're number two.
My number two is the best show that's ever been set in Scranton.
Oh.
It's The Office.
Of course.
Steve Carell and a bunch of other people. Okay, I thought that would be funnier, but who doesn't love The Office? Okay, that was a test. You didn't take the bait, so we can continue this friendship. But
I do actually love The Office.
strangely enough, between my sister telling me to watch it for years, by the way, I got her into Community, and she told me I should watch The Office, and I was like, no, because I'm not going to say I'm counterculture or anything like that, but there's something about watching a show at its height where everybody's talking about it that's I would say it's kind of a turnoff for me because everybody's talking about it. I feel no need to be one of those people around the water cooler saying, "Hey, did you see what happened on The Office last night?" That's never been me, and I realized as my oldest started getting into it, as a younger person, they were like, "Dad, watch this with me." And I was like, "Fine, because you're my kid and I love you. I'll watch this show with you." Although between us, they've also been trying to get me to watch Supernatural for 2 years, and that's still been a big fat no. But
That's funny.
I digress. There was something magical about The Office, and as I'm listening to the Office Ladies podcast, not saying you should turn this off and go listen to them, but in addition to TV dinners, the Office Ladies not a bad secondary choice, I guess. Learning that some of the magic that happened wasn't just from the writers' room was it was awesome to hear, but also hearing that some of the actual character, whether it was BJ Novak or Mindy Kaling, who were brought on to be writers for the show, and the fact that the showrunner was like, it's a good idea for the writers to also be actors. So whether they wanted to or not, like uh, what's his name played Toby, they basically was going to be Toby, and it was supposed to be like a one-off, but apparently because of the rapport or lack thereof with Michael Scott and Toby, executives at the network were like, we want more of this. So next thing you know, he's more of a recurring character. Same with Mindy and BJ. Although BJ Novak was kind of been there since the beginning as the temp, Brian the temp. But as some of these other characters started growing, becoming more and more part of the regular cast, the the not necessarily the depth of the show, but the show started the show started having more layers. You started noticing what's going on in the background, and you started noticing that the crew itself, by the way, done in a kind of a mockumentary style, fake documentary about you know uh, an office or paper supply office, right? Totally boring, but it's the people that really brought this world to life. And like I said, once everybody started hitting that next gear, not just through the lines of dialogue from the script, but the ad libbing, um, little the I'm just redundantly saying it, the improv, and letting the actors kind of set the tone for some of the relationships that's seen on screen, and the freedom of the crew to capture some of the epic background moments and reactions and things that just become a part of the Office lore. Yes, there's Office lore. Like, who is the screen
Yeah.
stranger? Hmm. Is it Toby? But I think at the end of the day, The Office just is just a funny show.
That's another one with like a billion episodes too. So rewatching The Office is actually kind of a fun endeavor, because it'll take you a long time to get through them all. And there is a bit of a narrative progression in The Office. It's not huge. It's very episodic for the most part, which also makes it kind of fun. It's a bit of a throwback, but there is some narrative progression throughout the series, which
Hmm.
does kind of build, on different episodes from the past. There is some character growth, I guess is the best way to say it,
Very
which
much.
does make it kind of interesting. Yeah.
It does, and that's you know what. The last thing I'm going to say about it is I rewatch it frequently. A couple times a year. It's like I just need The Office in my life right now, and every time it gets to those key moments, uh, I always wind up having the same journey, especially with like Jim and Pam, Michael and Holly, uh, and even Dwight and Angela. It's every time it manages to hook me and reel me in and make me fall in love all over again. And not many shows have that ability to do that to me. So I think at least
Nice.
once, everybody should check it out.
Um okay, so uh my next series is one that is it has a really strong such a strong fan base. um they actually have a name for each other, and Brian Fuller at the head of this is an absolute delight. He takes his fans extremely, both seriously and not seriously. I just love him. He created this entire world out of uh a fictional serial killer that obviously he thought needed more nuance. And I have to say, I'm really super glad that he created this, because it definitely is one of the series that I will watch and rewatch again. It's called Hannibal. It had Mad Mickelson as Hannibal, and Will Graham with Hugh Dancy is one of the most unexpected character loves I think I've ever had. There's such a huge community of people that love to ship together Hannibal and Will. And honestly, there is definitely some kind of erotic tension between the two of them. It's weird. It's not. It's not on the surface. It's very nuanced, and it's just tension below the surface. It's sort of brilliantly done. Um, on top of that, it is the story that I think that Hannibal should have been told with all along. That is Hannibal as an extremely well-mannered and just perfectly styled person. I mean, part of the reason that Hannibal is able to get away with the things that Hannibal can get away with is because no, no shade, and I mean this with all my heart, no shade to the Hannibal Lecters that have come before, okay? Because I happen to think that the movie Silence of the Lambs was absolutely astounding. I mean, it blew me away in so many different on so many different levels. And Anthony Hopkins, there's a place for him in the Hannibal universe, but when I think of Hannibal from the books, Matt Mickelson is actually more. the kind of person, character wise, that I think Hannibal Lecter was. And over the course of 3 seasons, Hannibal delivered a kind of story that was both episodic, because there were sort of like a killer of the week kind of things happening. Um, it's an FBI crime procedural on top of there being this very long narrative about Hannibal Lecter's relationship with with Will Graham and Jack Crawford. And it's it's all the things that Silence of the Lambs alluded to but never could ever get to, because that's not part of that story. Um, it's Brian Fuller did such a good job with this particular series, and there are parts of Hannibal that when you freeze the frame, it looks like art that should be on your wall. I mean, that's how good the set design is. That's how good the characters look in the frame. Everything feels like it was precisely measured. There is it's a disheveled story, but there is a precision to that dishevelment that is absolutely astounding. This series seriously goes into my, hey, if you want to watch something and you can, kind of handle something a little bit darker, this is totally that series. It's also heartbreaking. I mean, Hannibal is like, man, you really have to be like in a good headspace to be watching this, because there are things that happen here. It's on a fast track to disaster, and still, when you get to the disaster, you still feel heart-wrenchingly sad for everything. It can't end well for Will Graham. We know that. We know the story, we know the lore, and most of us have seen Silence of the Lambs, but that journey is just incredibly painful to get to. And so, for that, without saying too much more, I am just going to say this was absolutely one of the absolute best series I think I have seen. The dialogue in this alone is worth just listening to. Forget even the visuals, which are actually really amazing. Um, just listen to the dialogue. There is poetry in the delivery, there's poetry in the design of the dialogue, and then the delivery of that poetry is done to perfection by Mads Mikkelsen and Hugh Dancy. It's just absolutely wonderful. I should say that Lawrence Fishburne as Jack Crawford was also absolutely amazing. I mean, this man is just he is his acting skills are just so believable. I mean, never for a moment do I ever question any of these people as if, like, well, that they can't be this because they're this, or, I can only see them in this role because this is the role they were always in. They do such a good job of convincing you that they are the people that they are playing. And that to me is sort of that's one of the tests that I look for in a series that I want to watch again and again. So Hannibal gets my number two choice.
Haven't seen
Oh my gosh, you don't know what you're. Oh God, Josh, we have to talk. Um, this is really the Hannibal series is like I feel like the Hannibal series is one of those series that should be mandatory for people who want to write a successful TV series, that embody a fandom, any fandom, that isn't sort of the Marvel fandom, because the nuances of the source material along with new stuff to add to the drama make it works seamlessly. And you can tell that people loved this project. Like, you can tell that the people who were writing and designing and setting the elements in motion loved this source material. It's very obvious in a way that sometimes other shows feel like, yeah, it's good, but it doesn't feel like it was anybody's passion project. Hannibal is a passion project. So there you go. You should definitely watch that. It's super good.
Well, it's one of those shows that's always been on the periphery, but hasn't quite made it to the front of the line.
Hmm. This is one of those ones that we like. It played on NBC, and we again rearranged our schedule continually to make sure that we were available to watch it when it aired because it was that good. So yeah, no DVRing for us. That was a watch it in the moment series.
Mm.
So I'm excited now. What's your number one?
Well, I don't want to say my number one so much as it's the
What's
last
your
one on
number
my list.
one on the yeah, what's your last one on the list?
As far as great TV series goes, this one is widely considered to be one of the best. In fact, at one point, I don't know if it's still true, but it held the record for most watchers of a single program in TV history. Concurrently, it set a ratings record with its final episode, and I don't know if it's been topped because I don't know people just stopped talking about that sort of thing. But I'm talking about MASH.
Oh wow. Good choice.
When I was younger, and MASH would run in syndication on the weekends. It was generally an early afternoon deal. I would hear the opening, you know, uh, theme, "Suicide is
Suicide is
Painless,"
painless, yeah.
and I would go, "Nope, cartoons are over. Time to go outside." But when I got older, I don't know what caused it, but I suddenly found myself with this itch that needed to be scratched, with this sort of dark comedy, this introspective look at not war. This isn't about war as much as it is about the effects of an ongoing war, and it's not um, geopolitical effects. It's not you know uh, borders. It's the psychological effects of the people that have to be near it. It's about a group of doctors in a mobile surgical unit that are doing everything they can to basically stay sane in hell.
Right?
Every day is more wounded, more people sent off to collect bullets for what they find to be no real good reason. As Hawkeye kind of, waxes poetic in the OR and sips a dirty martini afterwards in his makeshift still. Finding best friends in the worst places, torturing those uh, that just don't seem to understand that when you're in extreme situations, by the book behavior doesn't lend to mental health; it detracts. Hawkeye, uh, he's basically the main character. Even though, yes, this is about a group of people as much as it can be. He jokes, but he's tortured. He loses a best friend and finds a new one, all in the name of holding on to something that he's gradually losing every day, and that reaches a peak when it comes to finale. Now, the supporting characters, they're supporting in a way that I I haven't really seen done as well before or since, because they support they support story, they support um, character development, and in a more real way, they support the camp, almost as if it was a real thing. Adding the and this is a recurring theme through all of the shows on my list, adding to the layers, the depth of the reality that you're watching, and the
So
input that everybody had in developing who they are, and how even their personal areas are perceived on screen. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, MASH came along at a really interesting time, and it really did sort of capture like a moment in American history. Which, again, for a lot of the series that we're talking about, were sort of like iconic to their time, and it's something interesting that I think that we should keep an eye on, sort of as entertainment goes forward. We're moving in a more homogenous direction. When people talk about the Disneyfication of TV, what they really mean is we are moving in the direction of having more homogenous styles on TV. MASH captured a really different kind of different version of sitcom than the American public was used to. It was darker. It was, in some ways, it was so funny, but it was so super serious. I mean, when you intersplice the super silliness of MASH and the really excellent dark comedy with scenes from the operating theater, it's hard to explain how those juxtapositions worked so well, but it was sobering at the same time that it was absolutely hilarious. And at the time that MASH was playing, we were moving in a direction of serial sitcoms, serial sitcoms, so I'll use those as an example, um, began to have more plot to them. So episodically, it wasn't like it was just a moment in time. It was episodically things were happening. So things happened in the past that they were able to allude to, like Henry, who was the original first, colonel in the camp. And as things moved forward and we, kind of keep going, we are able to see a progression. So character development became a bigger thing than most sitcoms had at the time. And that kind of becomes more the staple as you move forward in sitcom history. But it was a little bit unique then. We didn't have a lot of comedies where character development was a thing. Characters had epiphanies. And so, they would break through and be able to see something that they hadn't seen before, but they would go back to being basically the same archetype that they were in the next episode. MASH was different. MASH dealt with a lot of very serious themes, and the characters grew from those themes. And that, I think, makes it sort of stand apart from a lot of the other episodic sitcoms at the time. So really, really excellent, excellent choice. I feel like that is m- absolutely rewatchable again and again as a rerun. I think it's one of my most favorite reruns on TV. If I can find it on TV, I will definitely watch it.
And just want to point this two things out. Love the fact that each character has their own coping mechanism.
Yes.
That's a beautiful addition to the story. And two, you can't mention MASH without noting that the TV show ran longer than the actual war that it's based on.
Right, right. Good point.
So yeah, that's my my last pick.
Very good. Well, my last pick, and I do think that I have actually saved the best for last, is a series that tried to rebrand itself recently and didn't really do a good job of it. But the original is out of this world with unbelievable performances by Eva Green, um, and Timothy Dalton. I love them so much. Um, it's called Penny Dreadful. I'll just say it. Uh, Penny Dreadful starts out as a almost as a whodunit. They're searching for Timothy Dalton's daughter, and they know that she's basically been taken by a vampire. It sets up all of the awesomeness of Victorian England while interjecting all of these really creepy, very dark themes that revolve around the supernatural. The character Ethan is actually a I'm sorry, is actually a werewolf. Um, there are numerous sort of shout outs to iconic pieces of literature. There's a Dorian Gray, there's a Frankenstein, there is a Van Helsing. Frankenstein's creature is in it as well. It has a huge role. There are all of these incredible moments in Penny Dreadful that remind us of why Victorian Gothic literature is so incredibly powerful and why we still love it so much, while also injecting all of these awesome new ideas. And again, superb acting. Eva Green, I, you know, I can't say enough about her. Um, I love her. I mean, not just for this performance, although this performance is when I realized, I think, soberingly, that she is one of the most gifted actresses I think I've ever seen. Um, there's nothing in Penny Dreadful that doesn't make you cringe, and that is so much by design. But they're they intersperse it with these moments of what I guess I would consider to be like, the hope of humanity, the continual search for something better, the want and desire to be not just a better person, but exist in a world that is better. And everybody keeps trying to do that, despite the fact that the supernatural world is difficult to navigate and figure out. And it continually tries to thwart everything that they're doing. Um, Part of the other reason that I love Penny Dreadful as a rewatch is that the storylines are complicated. And I mean really complicated. Just dissecting the storyline between Frankenstein and Frankenstein's uh, creation are unbelievably difficult. And difficult meaning good, complicated. It's a joy to watch some of this stuff unravel and spiral into all of these different directions on screen. The Dorian Gray story is fabulous. I mean, it begins to intersperse with other stories which make it just so good. There are little vignette stories that happen as throwbacks or like past histories for some of the characters. There is a part of season, I think it's season 3, that starts in the Midwest. And there's Midwest lore in this story about Victorian England. And for all of those reasons, it makes this series just unbelievably amazing to watch. I absolutely love it in all of its different, even the flaws of this story are amazing. It's kind of like seeing um a mosaic and realizing that it's made up of a lot of cracked pottery. Even where there are fragmented pieces, the fragmented pieces come together to make something beautiful. Um, the special effects are good, but it's not the special effects of Penny Dreadful that make it a good series. It is absolutely the storylines and the compelling nature of the characters. I never would have thought that Timothy Dalton would have been like the character that I could see him eh, playing this role, but he's so amazing. I mean, the last time I remember seeing Timothy Dalton before Penny Dreadful was honestly as a 007. I don't really remember seeing him doing like something this big to me before then. And then, of course, now he's in Doom Patrol or was in Doom Patrol. But it's this idea of him being sort of like the leader of this group of sort of supernatural hunters while at the same time supernatural instigators is so epically put together. So Penny Dreadful gets my number one spot as rewatchable. Absolutely recommend if you have a free weekend or whatever. There's only 3 seasons. It's not super long, and there's only like 8 episodes per season, so it's not it doesn't take long to get through them all. But it's infinitely worth watching. So that gets my number one choice. And honestly, I feel like that is actually a good number one too. Like, I would choose that as number 1.
Okay. I'm glad you feel great about your selection.
I do. I do. Have you seen Penny Dreadful at all?
I have not.
Mm, okay. You can really see the difference in our lists. I was going to point this out before. Mm, my list is definitely a lot more uh, highly visually stylized. There is a lot on my list that is a bit darker in terms of its tonality, darker in terms of its just visual impact. Um, your list is a lot more. I hesitate to say it this way because it's not. This isn't a. There isn't anything wrong with this. It's just your list has a lot more zeitgeist. I think pieces to it that feel more populist in nature. Um, and also, I think the difference also between our list is definitely my list definitely tends to be a lot more cable pay stuff, and your list definitely seems to be a lot more mainstream. Hey, everybody kind of knows these things because they're on or have been on regular TV. So kind of cool. I think we made two very distinct styles here. What do you think?
Yeah, I can't say that I made a conscious decision to exclude anything that's on cable or a pay service. I
No, it's just what you like.
yeah,
Yeah.
there are a few series like I said. This was done with within 60 minutes. We
It's true.
we put it together real fast. Given some more thought, I would probably have some other things like I don't know. The League comes to mind.
Mm,
That I thought
that's
was
another solid choice.
a hilarious show. Um, I'd probably try to find something from Netflix because there are a few shows that I really enjoyed from Netflix. The question would be which one, you know.
Right.
So given time to kind of properly curate and add. I'm guessing I'd probably wind up with like 30 or 40 to pare down to 10. It would probably look uh, different than what my list is now, but at the same time, these are the survivors of, say, the first 15 that sprang to mind that
Right.
I absolutely love, and I stand by it.
This brings up, I think, a very interesting point, and that is that we have really sort of as a culture, especially internet culture, come to rely on a kind of list aggregation to give us ideas about what we may or may not like. And I noticed that IMDb's lists are curated um, in you can come up with a top 10 list, or actually, I should say a top 50 list, because that's usually what people do, for fantasy designs and things like that, that are as eclectic and varied as the people who make them. And so I like these kinds of ideas because they give you sort of a direction that maybe, and like I said, my list is a bit more dark, your list is a bit more light, but people out there have specific interests in one side or other, or a little mix of both. And I feel like this is one of the reasons that lists can be so good, because you may not have heard of some of these things before, or you may have just heard about them and then you hear more and you say, oh yeah, okay, that is actually something that I should explore. That's what gives us, I think, some of the meat of, okay, here's something that I'm willing to kind of take a look at. And that, I feel like, is a good thing. That's a really good thing.
Agreed.
Well, I am going to ask you, Josh, to because this has been a great episode. I really have appreciated it. Thank you so much for everything. We have run way over time again, as we usually do on 10 to 1. And so I am going to ask you how we can find you on social media and tell us about whatever is coming up for you.
Well, as always, you can go to wadcomedia.com, the website with all the pertinent links and information to what we're doing with Wadco Media. And most importantly, I think if you utilize those links to the Facebook pages for Wadco Media on Facebook, where we're broadcasting this live right now, you can always take part in the conversations for, the Wadco Media podcast, as well as the Wadcast, which is going to be coming at everybody live Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. What's it going to be about? I don't know. It's not 10 minutes before air. That's usually when these things kind of start falling into place. But I did tease that there's a tentative idea about uh, critics and audience, how they watch movies and review movies, and specifically, most recently, Black Adam, how the critic scores and the audience scores wound up so drastically apart. What could be the cause of that? So we're going to take a look at that and give our best thoughts. But watcomedia.com, that's the place with all the links to where's the Patreon? Sure, whatever. But if you think it would be much cooler to spend money on a t shirt, well, there's a merchandise place for that. So check that out as well. Jen?
I what am I doing? I guess I don't really have anything sort of happening until next week, but I do have a weekend of posting to moviesandmeals.com, so I'm super excited about that. We are gearing up for Christmas and Christmassy movies, holiday movies, let's just call it. I am really seriously thinking about subscribing to the Hallmark Halloween. I'm not, I can't believe I just said that. See, Halloween is really on my mind. I'm seriously thinking about subscribing to the Hallmark Christmas Channel subscription. This is the first time that I would have ever done this, but the number of movies that Hallmark churns out for Christmas are enormous. And I'm actually kind of excited about what that could mean for the blog. So look forward to some hopefully really cool Christmas and holiday fare over there at moviesandmeals.com. We next week hopefully will get to have our podcast about TV series that deal with food. So, yeah, I'm talking about like Bob's Burgers and talking about all of the shows that we kind of love that deal with either holiday food or just food in general. Uh, yes. Hopefully, he won't be around at the time that we have this conversation, because I'm sure he would not like some of, especially Bob's food. Um, but I have a ton of movie and TV shows that kind of have segues and tie-ins for just sort of for movies that deal with that. Also, one last thing before we go. Josh, I want to say thank you so much for stepping in and giving us all of this super awesomeness at a time when sometimes we don't always have a full panel to get our shows off the ground. So when that happens, I'm really grateful to Josh for stepping in and doing something unique, something unexpected, something fun. Really major appreciation to you. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Although I do like to think that we used our Wednesday show to hijack the Thursday show
Kind of. We
and
we had
kind
a
of cross
we had a
pollinate.
double we had a double show. We had a double 10-1 this week. So kind of cool. Very cool.
And it's was out of our normal operating realm.
That's right. Which is always a good thing. I
Lists
feel like
about
that is always good.
TV? What?
Indeed. 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 Okay, well, I will see you all hopefully next week, and we will have a fun time. And we will also have another fun time on our 10-1 show next week on Wednesday when we will be counting down. What will we be counting down, Josh?
War movies that are
War
set pre
movies.
20th century.
That's going to be an interesting one. I actually had already put together part of my list yesterday after our show, so I think it's going to be fun. Very cool. So we will see you on 10-1. We will see you on Friday for the Wadcast for sure. Well, you'll see Josh anyway. And we'll see you next week here on TV Dinners. Thank you everyone for enjoying this lovely 2.5 hours